GCVazquez, random guy on the internet. You might know me from some of my gaming related videos, like my retrospectives on Dragon Quest and Like a Dragon, or my videos on not having to finish games and debunking replay value. I thought today I'd combine these two styles of videos to talk to you about an emerging trend I'm seeing in the way we interact with art, namely international art. I think it's important to discuss the way we interact with international art. We're in a time where international art is transcending the confines of where it was made, so it's imperative that we understand the lenses with which we view international art and the misconceptions we might form when interacting with it. Let's talk about it. Back in the day, international art was the sort of thing you'd catch on TV randomly or find in your uncle's cabinet of imported VHS tapes, but it's everywhere now. Some of us consume more international art than we do art from our own respective cultures. The popularity of international art today means a great deal of our formative experiences are shaped by cultures we've never been a part of. So I think it's imperative to examine that art with a sufficient level of scrutiny, just as we do with art from home. Given my viewer demographics, I'm assuming you have some familiarity with Like a Dragon already, so I'm going to use it and the country of Japan as examples for what I'm talking about. If you don't have a frame of reference for this, don't worry. What I'm going to say can still be applied to any other piece of international art and the culture it originates from. I believe it is imperative that we understand what international art is, the falsehoods we might apply when discussing or interacting with it, and the intent behind that art being readily available to us. When I use the term international art, I'm basically saying any piece of art you interact with that isn't from one of your own cultures. In a broad sense, this is art from a different hemisphere, continent, or country, but I think it can also be used to reference regional or distinct ethnic differences as well. For example, there are many Native American groups all across the United States, all with separate cultures, traditions, and histories. Artists from these regions, despite being geographically close or even within the boundaries of the country, are going to make art that is heavily influenced by a different set of experiences and backgrounds. Therefore, when I say international art, I'm also including art from cultures that might be closer than you think. I want you to think of any piece of art or media that was created by someone from your own culture. Think about who they might be, what their lived experience is, what they believe in, the kind of people they know, their upbringing, all that stuff. Now, I want you to think about when the art was made, what its setting might be, the issues in your culture that were hot topics at the time. Think about how the artist might feel about those things, the stories they might want to share about their lives, and the way those feelings and those stories overlap. Art is representative of what the artists want to say. It can be complex, it can be simple, it can talk about a lot of things, it can talk about one thing, it can even unintentionally say things it didn't mean to say, it can do those things poorly, it can do them well. You can agree with what art is saying, you can disagree with what art is saying. Art is largely one person's thoughts being expressed in a way meant to inspire or convince you to reassess the way you think or see something. Art can be seen as a celebration of those thoughts, of a certain people, or of a form of expression. Art can also be seen as harmful. It can be seen as offensive or misleading. In fact, especially in our super digital age, art can be used to misinform or actively hurt people, and to the same degree can be used to inform or assist them. And it's open to interpretation. Whatever an artist means to convey through their work can end up being totally different to you. The phenomenon that I'm running into a lot when discussing international art is people forget what art and the point of discussing it is when it's from a place we're not entirely familiar with. Some of them use international art to justify a variety of actions or certain mindsets. I would like to talk to you today about the many ways we do this and why they're not productive and are ultimately harmful both to the discussion of art and also to the people of the cultures we're being exposed to. Starting with a real-life issue being discussed in Japan right now, and one I think the Like a Dragon series contributes to in negative ways. It's why tourists suck. Recently, I've taken up trying to learn Japanese. It's halfway between an academic interest and an attempt at knowing enough to be appropriately polite and/or casual in various social situations. I'm trying to learn Japanese because I want to play video games lacking localizations, and I'm hoping to visit the country someday. Tourism rates in Japan are skyrocketing, and it's going to do what it does best: make money for the country while the locals grow increasingly frustrated and inconvenienced by it. I've been watching and reading lots of Japan-related media. Online personalities out there are making videos and shorts about Japan, immigrants who document what adjusting to a different country is like, native Japanese trying to debunk a lot of common misconceptions about the culture, and many people who insist they know the one trick to learning Japanese no one tells you about. Naturally, they've all been weighing in with their thoughts on the tourism boom. The audience for these videos is massive. Millions of folks tune in to hear these educators, entertainers, and vloggers share their thoughts about all sorts of Japan-focused conversations and base their opinions on what they hear in those videos. Without having ever stepped foot in the country, millions of people form beliefs about it and the people living there seemingly overnight. I call this virtual tourism. Now, virtual tourism isn't inherently bad. I think it's a great way to learn about other places and people before physically going there. Learn about certain customs or how to be polite before you interact with someone. Plan out your itinerary and pick up on some advice about traveling there, maybe on how to conduct your vacation in a way that's less disruptive for the locals. You might even learn about specific laws or common scams targeting tourists to avoid trouble. I was born and raised in Miami, Florida. It's a very popular tourist town, especially in the spring and summer. Did you know, for example, college kids coming to Miami for their breaks tend to get the beach so trashed that it can take weeks to clean up? Locals prefer it when tourists clean up after themselves. Knowing this ahead of time would help you to be mindful of your surroundings if you visit, and we really do appreciate people from out of town doing their best to be respectful of our backyard. So I think there's merit to getting to know a place and having a little bit of an idea about its people before you show up. Etiquette, norms, things like that. Alternatively, tourists, especially virtual tourists, can make those places out to be one-dimensional or insist that all people from those places are a certain way. I empathize a lot with the frustrations Japanese citizens might be having with tourists. I understand how annoying it can be to have your entire identity reduced down into memes and headlines about where you're from. Virtual tourism is great for learning tidbits of trivia and a few tips on how to have a better vacation, but tourists have a habit of rinsing out the nuance and diversity of a place and start to see it as a fantasy world they can do whatever they want in so long as they believe certain things about it. International art, especially video games, is no stranger to the concept of virtual tourism. People use international art to familiarize themselves with certain elements of another place all the time. Modern Persona titles are always set in distinct Japanese locales. Shenmue captures the feeling of a rural mountain town. The environments of Like a Dragon are meticulously done in order to convey a sense of authenticity. Product placement, though extremely aggressive, is used to anchor the world in reality. And yes, like 90% of all sub-stories in the series are based on real-life scams that can and probably have actually happened. For virtual tourists, international art allows them to immerse themselves in these places. To an extent, you have to be careful with discerning what's realism and what's being played around with. Like a Dragon has historically been made for Japanese audiences. The authenticity of its cities aren't designed to make foreigners feel like they're really there. They're made with the expectation that Japanese people will be able to spot the goofier elements of how they've built the world. Yes, it's important that it's authentic, but it also wants to provide an entertaining or interesting representation of the world its primary audience recognizes. A great analogy for this, if you're from America, is Grand Theft Auto. Yes, I know Like a Dragon and Grand Theft Auto are not the same kind of game. I know back in the day this comparison was made in marketing to the detriment of Like a Dragon. I am not comparing these two games entirely, just this particular element. Okay, Moving on. Speaking from personal knowledge, Vice City in particular does a tremendous job capturing the essence of what Miami, and even more specifically Collins Avenue, must have felt like in the 80s. But Americans are hyper aware of the fact that the Grand Theft Auto series isn't meant to be a completely faithful reconstruction of the American cities the games take place in. Because GTA is art. We're able to understand where the creators deviated from reality in order to satirize or parody or exaggerate aspects of American culture. We do this subconsciously, and we remain immersed in the setting because we suspend our disbelief while we explore the art. Whether or not you agree with Rockstar's cynical, satirical criticism of the modern American dream, you are still able to register that the world and story of Grand Theft Auto are not meant to serve the purpose of a travel brochure. It is based on the creators' perspectives and attitudes towards the culture, influenced by the experience they've lived exposed to that culture. It is art making a statement about that culture and the issues affecting it, and asking its audience to consider what it's saying. If that statement reaches international audiences, it wants to do the same with that audience. Those are its thoughts of American culture and American issues it wants to promote. Obviously, if you're American, you know that Grand Theft Auto does not possess the only perspective Americans have about their culture or society. You know GTA doesn't represent or even talk about all of the American people or distinct American cultures. Even if that's what it was trying to do, and to be clear, I don't think it is, you would still know better than that. Hopefully. The only thing you know for certain is that whoever makes GTA has an opinion or a criticism or an observation about American culture and issues and wants to persuade you into thinking along those lines. You might already agree, you might vehemently disagree. The discussion that arises as a result of different thoughts on it is what art is for. For whatever reason, a lot of people tend to look at international art as being totally representative of an entire culture or people instead of what it actually is, representing the thoughts of someone from that culture about specific things they feel about specific issues relevant to them in that culture. Further compounded when looking at collaborative art like video games. Art with so many contributing minds, it congeals into a blend of several ideas and thoughts, and then filtered through a smaller group of individuals, or in the case of early Yakuza, sometimes just one, to convey a central message. This leads to many misconceptions about the people from those cultures, and also leads to making generalizing statements about them based on what you've heard. Therefore, when international art gets criticized for what it's saying, many people interpret this as an offense to the culture it's from, or use it to justify offense towards said culture. There's definitely creators out there making sweeping statements about Japanese culture or people, and viewers eat it up. It's not even exclusive to Japan. This sort of content is done all over the world about all sorts of countries and cultures. Even the good-natured, well-meaning content that's just trying to close the gap and show everyone how we're all still human and do human things no matter where we are, is still co-opted by some of its audience to generalize about entire groups of people. It's a virtual tourist trap people often get caught in. We interact with a lot of art from one general area and begin assuming truths about the culture it's from one way or another. Even though it's entirely possible the art we're interacting with, the content we're absorbing, might all be sharing a similar opinion. The art we're consuming might not reflect the whole conversation it's adding to. This doesn't mean you can't agree or disagree with what the art is saying, but you also cannot make the assumption that the entire country of people where it's from agree or disagree with what it's saying. This is especially true about Like a Dragon. To the people of Japan, Like a Dragon is domestic art with a target audience, and what it's saying to its target audience is not something everyone in Japan agrees on. It is also a very specific representation of how the people who had the ultimate say in what it was going to say view various Japanese issues. Those perspectives on those issues are packaged into a piece of art or media or entertainment and then delivered to an audience with the intent of selling that audience on those perspectives. I'd like to go on record right now to say, if you use my videos when I criticize what Like a Dragon is saying in its messaging or representation to condemn all Japanese people or all of Japanese society, or use it as a springboard to launch into a tirade about how Japanese culture is backwards, don't do that. We don't do that here. But if you're also going to cover your ears, stick your head in the sand, and pretend that Japan doesn't have anything like social issues, human rights issues, feminist movements, don't do that either. That would be like saying America doesn't have social issues, human rights issues, or feminist movements. Of course it does. In the case of Like a Dragon, if I criticize its Korean or Chinese representation, or describe the way I think it portrays women in a consistently negative light, I am not condemning all of Japan as racist and sexist. I am making the case that this specific piece of art from this place is making claims about these people that are not necessarily accurate, fair, or productive. To take Like a Dragon at face value as being an unequivocal truth about Japan, whether you're criticizing or accepting what it's saying, is to make a broad assumption about an entire culture of people based on the thoughts and opinions of probably about 5 of them. This is the power virtual tourism has. Harmful international art can indeed be trying to install misconceptions about its culture into the minds of outsiders in order to find a platform for its views. You might not realize this if you're American, but American art is impossible to avoid, even if you're in another country. We have one of, if not the largest entertainment industry in the world. People are more or less forced to engage with American media all around the world because the entertainment world is completely saturated by it. It's for that reason that I believe people from outside American culture have every right to criticize and analyze and have opinions about what American art says. Because if American art is portraying me or someone else in a harmful way, it would improve my outlook to have international audiences express solidarity with me. But when people make observations or critiques about the art, they're often rebuked. And I'm not referring to trolls and grifters looking to make human connections via overused memes because they're afraid of being vulnerable. In the case of international art, there is a widespread habit of dismissing critiques or praises of it by insisting the culture it's from is completely alien to whomever is talking about the art. Not only does this spit in the face of why international art is international in the first place, but it's also condescending towards the culture you're referring to. When someone critiques or examines international art, in my experience, especially Japanese art, the pushback they get is often from individuals performing what I call Western culture gymnastics. It usually sounds like this: stick to American games and keep your Western propaganda brain to yourself. That's a different culture, continent, and mentality. If there's someone who doesn't understand something, it's only you. Not everything is about you and your American ideals. It may be premature to judge other people from a different nation and culture using our own values, which they most probably do not share, and which the West is lately trying to force other people to accept through media. The problem with these types of videos is that it comes from a Westoid perspective who always try to change other cultures' perspectives, which is funny because it's just another form of imperialism. Full disclosure, these are real comments I've received on multiple videos. The specifics always change, but the general gist is whatever you're saying about the art or its message are invalid or incorrect because you are applying an outside cultural perspective. Western culture gymnasts love to insist on this idea that Japanese culture is utterly unique, isolated, and impossible to understand, while at the same time claiming that many other cultures geographically to the west of it are all homogenized, influenced by each other, and are attempting to undermine Japanese values. If the deflection is allowed to go on long enough, they tried to make Japan out to exist in a vacuum. You don't get it. This is entirely foreign to you. There's nothing that you have in common with this culture. You don't think like Japanese people. They're all so unique and special and different. By saying Japanese culture is totally unique and shares no common aspects with other cultures, you're not only ignoring centuries of history between Japan and other countries, you're essentially othering that culture. You're insisting they're not like us, and you're implying that they don't have any concept of the issues being discussed in the art they make. You're basically putting words in their mouths and acting like they can't have opinions about these things. People who jump through these hoops end up assisting bad actors who want to caricaturize an entire society of people based on the specific pieces of art they've interacted with. Obviously, Japanese culture is different from other cultures, but this idea that cultures don't share commonalities, or that in our modern age, people around the world don't share ideological values or parts of their identity, is silly. It's the whole reason we love international art in the first place. We relate to the shared experiences we find in it. Developed countries face a lot of similar issues, and their societies are often divided on many of them. You don't have to be Japanese to relate to a Japanese person complaining about their boss. You don't need to be Japanese to understand the anger or sorrow a Japanese person feels when they learn their partner is cheating on them. You don't have to be Japanese to comprehend why a Japanese person is frustrated about the cost of living, or their wages, or the stress of trying to meet societal expectations. And you definitely don't have to be from a specific culture to understand the concepts of racism, gender discrimination, and nationalism. Identifying these elements evident in the international art you're interacting with is not an exclusive power only allowed to the people who share the location the art is from. When I criticized Yakuza 6 for its representation of Korean and Chinese people, I got a lot of comments saying I had no understanding of what I was talking about because I didn't have a single frame of reference for what I was saying. As a Hispanic in the United States, I can argue I almost certainly have at least a frame of reference for what racist or stereotypical representation of people in media looks like. As a Hispanic, I can personally guarantee for you, Hispanics definitely have the capacity to be racist. And I would be willing to bet a lot of Asian people are aware or agree that Asians have the capacity to be racist as well. It's a systemic issue in many places based on decades and even centuries of history. And it's highly likely that South Korea also had a frame of reference for this when it banned Yakuza 6 from being sold there a day before the full release. Obviously, not every Japanese person out there is a racist. That doesn't mean there aren't stereotypes about Koreans and the Chinese Japanese people aren't aware of. That doesn't mean a Japanese writer can't pen a story that utilizes those stereotypes, or in the case of Yakuza 6, creates a model minority character out of the Central Korean of the game. And criticism of this art for doing those things is not an indictment of all of Japan or all Japanese people. It's a statement about the art, and I suppose by extension a question about the intent of the author. This would also be true if someone were to praise something like Boys Run the Riot, a coming-of-age manga about a trans-mask high school student, or My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness, an autobiographical story about the author's mental health and sexuality, for being solid depictions and portrayals of Japanese LGBTQ+ experiences. Would this person be implying that all of Japan is inclusive and open-minded? Of course not. Would they be implying that the LGBTQ+ community in Japan is not without its challenges and struggles? Of course not. There's currently a very important LGBTQ+ movement in Japan right now, with people fighting for the right to marry their loved ones. Art like this reflects the experiences those authors have had within their culture and doesn't even capture a majority of the spectrum of experiences to begin with. But that doesn't mean people from other cultures can't relate to or identify what these pieces of art are saying. Trying to wash out the nuance of another culture's issues by making them something other than human is negligent of the fact that their society is just as complex as ours is. It also enforces the idea that we can't relate to them in any way. If I'm not from the culture, and the culture is so intensely different from mine, then how does anyone who's not from the culture identify or relate to the art at all? How does that art even become popular? Let's assume Western culture gymnastics are more than just a dismissive handwave of legitimate critiques or praises of art. Okay, my commentary on Like a Dragon is now null and void because I really don't have a single frame of reference. However, this also means the emotionally driven, intense character drama of the narrative is also impenetrable to me. It would be completely alien because, according to these gymnastics, our cultures do not share anything between them. I simply wouldn't be able to understand it, and neither would you, assuming you're not Japanese. But obviously, the cultures do share values and ideas. Otherwise, a Japanese man shedding tears over his loneliness wouldn't resonate with us around the world. Otherwise, you wouldn't be defending or countering criticism or praise of the art because of what you believe in. When I point this out to people performing Western culture gymnastics, they're quick to specify the issue with my critiques is I'm criticizing cultural or social aspects of Japan from an outsider's perspective, but what exactly do they mean when they say Western culture or Western perspective? See, the West is a pretty big place. Is South America included in the West? Is Europe, West Asia, Canada, Mexico? By referring to the West, are you implying that all of these places have the same cultural DNA and social norms and are all secretly trying to change Japan specifically? Or are you referring more to just America? Interesting. Let's explore that, because America is a very big place with many different ideologies and beliefs. This is super important. Remember this. If the problem with critiques of Like a Dragon and other pieces of Japanese art have to do with trying to insist American values upon Japan, what exactly, in your opinion, are American values? Because I have pretty good firsthand experience and can confidently say that social and cultural issues in America are hotly contested, very much the center of many debates, and include too many perspectives and nuances to count. Moreover, assuming you're not Japanese, and oftentimes the Western culture gymnasts are, in fact, not Japanese, your values, are they not Western? Or at least not Japanese? Don't you think it's weird to dismiss one person's views on international art based on their cultural background, but then turn around and apply your own cultural background to the international art to claim it as deeply meaningful media for yourself? Isn't that a little presumptuous by your own logic? Western culture gymnasts are very quick to shut down criticisms of international art, but will then give everyone else a free pass to say whatever they feel about the art, so long as how they feel about it syncs up with the artist's perspective, or how the gymnast feels about it. So what would happen if I were to praise the art? What if I made a video praising the art for its stance on those issues? What if I said, I'm really glad Yakuza 6 has these depictions of Korean and Chinese people, or wow, this series is really inclusive and understands how to represent trans people? Would that still be me applying my incongruous cultural perspective? Or is it only a cultural issue if I say what you don't want me to say? Am I not still applying a Western culture perspective? I would have to be, right? I'm from the West. You can't turn your brain off to form coherent thoughts, and your brain is an amalgamation of what you've experienced and been exposed to. And if Japanese culture is so different and foreign, then there's no way in hell I can pretend or assume a Japanese mindset when thinking and talking about Japanese art. Also, what exactly do you think Japanese culture is? Western culture gymnastics is designed to limit fair criticism or praise whenever said criticism or praise happens to misalign with the gymnast's fetishized worldview of Japanese culture. It does it in a way that dehumanizes or infantilizes people from the culture they're claiming to be protecting. In order for Western culture gymnastics to be successful, it has to insist that an entire culture of people have never criticized what is, for them, domestic art. that all international art is ubiquitously supported by everyone in the culture it's from, that the art itself is so uniquely alien to the rest of the world that the only option we have as outsiders is to observe it passively and ultimately shrug our shoulders and accept whatever message it's trying to convey as representative of the entire culture it's from. These people suggest that international art can neither be praised or criticized internationally. Paradoxically, however, Western culture gymnastics also carries the implication that the gymnast has the supposed correct opinion on the art. So even though it's all foreign and different, the gymnast is an exception to the rule. The gymnast gets it because he's compliant with the ideologies the art is championing. Western culture gymnastics goes as far as to insist that people from the culture the gymnast is claiming to speak for, who don't agree with the gymnast, are wrong. Not on the basis that their ideologies are opposed. If that were the case, the conversation would be about the issue and their beliefs on that issue. It would be intense and potentially full of a whole other list of problems, but it would be expected. It would kind of make sense and make it plainly obvious what each person feels about that specific issue. Instead, the gymnast makes it about the validity of that person's connection with their own culture on the basis that those people have been compromised by outside influences. In this moment, the gymnast, after reducing the culture into a monolithic singularity, makes the implication that they are more of that one-dimensional representation than the other person. And in this warped version of what the gymnast has made the culture out to be, that actually might be true. This is the gymnast's strongest tool because it will attract like-minded people from those cultures who will reinforce this idea in order to gain an advantage in the ongoing discourse around the issue at hand. You might be wondering, why go through all the trouble? Why would people from those cultures allow people outside of the culture to undermine the validity of another person's cultural status? Well, in both cases, the answer is closer to home than you think. Remember how I was talking about virtual tourism and those videos you can find about Japan? Well, they aren't just about debunking misconceptions and sharing thoughts on relevant issues. I mean, they are, but there's a lot you can learn about people based on the way they present those thoughts. I'm not gonna name anybody, but I kind of don't have to. You can find plenty of folks pointing at the stereotype of Japan's work culture to say Japanese people are willing to do anything to get the job done. They'll cite examples of Japanese game devs working long hours and missing important family moments as evidence of the quality of their work. They'll say things like, "These are the things that set Japanese people apart." It's evident in those videos that they have a very specific view of what Japanese culture is, and clearly have opinions that are surely supported by others in Japan, but it's not an opinion everyone in Japan agrees with, or even accurate to say. In fact, the average number of hours worked per person per year in Japan has dropped significantly in the last 20 years. Tokyo CNN wrote an article about Tokyo introducing a 4-day workweek for its government employees, a clear sign that enough people in Japan believe this idea of Japan's work ethic is detrimental to other aspects of their daily living. And even more to the point I'm making here, CNN Tokyo also reports that at least one labor union in Japan says men are afraid of taking the 4-week paternity leave they are legally entitled to because they're afraid their bosses might retaliate. So I think that view of Japanese work culture is a little dated and possibly narrow-minded. I honestly think it's a little weird to point at essentially crunch culture, something plaguing hardworking people at every business around the world, and saying that's a positive note about Japanese culture we should emulate. As if Western companies aren't already doing that? Surely the talent at places like Square Enix and From Software are the reason Elden Ring and Final Fantasy VII were successful, and not that everyone slept under their desks in order to finish them within corporate mandated deadlines. Some of you might be wondering what I'm getting at. It's pretty obvious from those types of videos that some folks have preconceived notions of Japanese people and what they like about the culture. When they refer to the culture of Japan, they're championing their version of what Japanese society should be proud of. Am I going to say they have no idea what they're talking about? No. A good amount of them have lived in Japan for over a decade now, I think. I think that's long enough in a country to consider yourself a part of the culture, and you know what? They probably know plenty of Japanese people who agree with them. And sure, they've got a broad range of opinions about things and aren't without their own criticisms of Japanese culture, but that doesn't mean they haven't leaned one way or another in respect to Japanese politics and social issues based on their general beliefs of how things should work. I mean, clearly they have an opinion about the way people in the West do things and use their perspective of those things to form their opinions on Japanese issues or societal quandaries. They're honestly a benign example of a greater problem. The urge people have of establishing other cultures and their people as safe havens for their beliefs. The safe haven concept is the name I'm giving it, but there's probably an academic term for it somewhere in a research paper. I don't know, I didn't go that far looking into it. It's more or less this. The less secure one feels about their own beliefs within their respective cultures, the more disillusioned or dissatisfied they are with their respective cultures, the greater the possibility they view other cultures or societies as places where they can express their beliefs or ideologies unchallenged. The more likely they are to assign other cultures those ideologies in order to preserve their way of thinking, so to speak. I hesitate to use the word monoculturalism here because it doesn't quite relate to what I'm getting at, but this is very close to monoculturalism's shtick. They want to portray other cultures as one-dimensional because they want to view their own cultures as one-dimensional. The people that do this safe haven stuff with Japan view it as a monocultural society, and that's what they like about it. Using Japan as a safe haven usually comes from the perspective of someone who believes their own ideologies are under attack wherever they're from. It may be prudent to examine exactly what their ideologies or perspectives are. For instance, if perhaps those ideologies are harmful to others. Remember what I said earlier? America is a place with many ideologies and beliefs, but people who don't accept that very much believe that people who disagree with them are un-American. This is often the opinion of the status quo crowd, people who don't like change and would refuse progress just on the basis of that status quo being disrupted. They insist that people who can't accept that America is one specific way or should only believe in one specific thing should leave, one way or another. A big part of the anti-immigration crowd thinks like this, that if you want to be treated better, to go back to your own country, even if they're saying it to a third-generation American. Especially after the US elections in the last 8 years, you'll see a lot of Americans talking about moving to other countries where everything is, quote, better, unquote. Very real considerations about migrating to a different country in order to feel safe in your own skin aside, most people from elsewhere looking at Americans say this, shake their heads and say, this place has its own fair share of problems for you to deal with. I can tell you, there's a lot of people who don't seem to understand the difference between what an oppressive government says is the case and what's actually going on or how the people living there feel. Which is shocking to me, considering most Americans by now ought to have a little bit of first-hand experience with that sort of thing. The fact remains, people from one culture have a tendency to look at other cultures as bastions for their ideals, rather than places with people who also fight about those ideals on a constant basis. The way they do it might certainly be different than how we might do it, but they are discussing it all the same. It goes without saying, but neither Japan nor any other country for that matter is a harbor for your views, perspectives, or ideologies. No matter where you go, well, most of the places you can go, there's always going to be a discussion around the issues you think aren't similar from one place to the next. The safe haven concept relies on treating other cultures as fantasy worlds where what you believe in is always going to be the accepted norm, and it ignores the very nature of culture itself. Culture isn't static, nor is it singular. People change, and as a result, so does society and art. Sometimes it regresses, sometimes it moves forward, sometimes it, in fact, stagnates, and sometimes it does all three at the same time because there's so many elements and facets to culture and art that are constantly shifting because people are constantly shifting and changing and learning. However, people from these places who benefit from having their entire culture viewed in very specific ways know the power art has to shape the overall landscape of that culture. With a big enough voice, you can spread a lot of awareness or misinformation about all kinds of things. And what better way to do it than by installing it inside an art piece? Art can be incredibly convincing, and if someone wants people to think about or believe certain things, it's very easy to do so through artistic mediums, especially for audiences that might not have a complete understanding of what those issues are. The safe haven concept helps distribute and normalize harmful art in a way that makes it difficult to challenge. Americans who believe in very specific things want you to synonymize their culture with patriotism and fervent worship because it makes it easier for them to get away with doing or saying things without consequence. Likewise, Japanese who believe in specific things want you to synonymize their culture with certain concepts because it helps normalize their perspective and diminishes the value of dissenting opinions. So what? Japanese art has no actual basis in Japanese culture? There's no truth to anything in it? Of course there is, but not everything in it is an absolute truth about where it's from. There's a big difference between the way Like a Dragon presents taxi services in Japan and, I don't know, its take on childless middle-aged women. One of these things is an observable fact of matter recreated for the sake of authentic setting and realism. The other is very clearly someone's thoughts presented via artistic expression. Same difference with, say, Law & Order filming on location to shoot a reasonably believable scene, and its take on pretty much whatever headlines the writer saw on Yahoo News a week ago. Even if these are popular opinions within their respective cultures, it doesn't make them impervious to examination and critique. And we might disagree on whether or not these works are saying what we claim they're saying, but the conversation should be focused on establishing evidence for those claims. We should be having conversations facilitating further investigation of those claims and maybe even evolving those conversations into discussions about how the people making the art could do better, whether it's avoiding saying certain things or improving the way they're saying them in the future. So art can't be challenging? It can't make us uncomfortable? Are you kidding? Of course it can. But there's a very obvious difference between art meant to inspire action or change via highlighting uncomfortable or grotesque truths about our world or others' experiences, and art that's promoting those grotesque truths or trying to normalize harmful ideas about the people who've had to live those experiences. So what does this have to do with Like a Dragon? I think it's a problem to take any piece of Japanese media or art, including Like a Dragon, and disregard its harmful portrayal of specific people on the basis that it is Japanese. I think the excuse of "it's Japanese" is disrespectful to Japanese people who know better and implies the Japanese people responsible for these portrayals are incapable of doing better. And if the people responsible have willfully chosen to include these portrayals in their art, then there is all the more reason for the art to be criticized. When there are well-documented movements by several nations to conflate culture with country, when the art from those places can intentionally be used as propaganda to rehabilitate the image of those countries under the guise of being cultural touchstones, when said efforts are also being used to justify the erasure of minority groups and dismiss the plight of marginalized people in their respective cultures to the rest of the world, we need to examine international art with keen eyes and careful hands. I think reducing these conversations about art to where it's from gives other people an easy excuse to remain ignorant of other cultures, allows them to continue using their ignorance of those cultures to justify their own behaviors, and strengthens the platform of like-minded people in those cultures to continue spreading misinformation and harmful ideologies with the support of external reinforcement. And I think, to a certain extent, Like a Dragon is sometimes that art. And that sounds like a lot of qualifiers, but that's the point. It's not all the time. It's not consistently black and white. Sometimes it's outright harmful. Sometimes it gets it kind of right. Sometimes it means well and trips and falls on its face. It's always touching on a different subject, and that's part of what makes it worth investigation and study, but not on the basis of whether or not it is representative of the entire Japanese people, simply on basic fundamental principles about how we should treat others. And this is true for all art and all international art. And we cannot shut down this pursuit of understanding and awareness just because it comes from a place not of our own, especially when that place is as modern, as developed, and as mainstream as our own. As long as people continue to view other cultures like Japan as special niche places, as long as they make generalizations using the art from these places, the worse the conversations around these works of art are going to get.